France is like a wounded shark. France is like a wounded elephant. You know, like the going says, when you are swimming with the sharks, when one starts to bleed, you get out of the water. My advice to the United States would be, France is bleeding really, really badly. France is wounded really, really badly when it comes to its relationships with Africa. So I would advise the United States to get out of the water.
In her recent interview with Aljazeera, Dr. Arikana Chihombori has simple advice for the United States regarding her relationship with Africa. France is bleeding, she said. If you don't want to bleed like France, stop acting like France, Dr. Chihombori says. Explaining how evil France is, she said this.
You tell me, why is it that 95% of Nigerian uranium is powering over 30% of France, while over 70% of Nigerians have no electricity? How is that okay?
About France forcing African countries to keep their foreign reserves in France and to sell their raw materials at 5% of the international price, Dr. Arikana said,
how is it okay that my money, my bank reserves, my natural resources are funding French education, are funding French healthcare, are funding French infrastructure? How is that okay, President Macron? Answer us. Africans in Niger, they want to know.
Why talking about how the United States could as well become a wounded elephant in Africa, Dr. Arikana referred to the US VP's visit to the continent.
Let me take you back to the visit to Africa by Vice President Kamala Harris. You know, it was quite interesting that with all the issues that were going on in Africa, for example, when she went to Zambia, there were mudslides that were killing hundreds of people next door to Malawi. She did not go to Malawi, did not even mention Malawi, but spent a lot of time in Zambia trying to push an LGBTQ agenda. An agenda that Africans across the continent are saying, it's really not an issue for us. We have more important things to worry about, but Vice President Harris spent a lot of time on the LGBTQ. I'm not saying it's not an important issue, but when it comes to the greater scheme of things, the Africans are telling you that this is not a priority for us. We grew up with people who were trans. I remember growing up in my village, we had men who looked feminine. They would hang around women. They did their thing. Nobody cared. We had women who lived with women. We called them spinsters, and nobody cared. You know, I grew up seeing people who were clearly gay looking, and it was never an issue. So the Africans are telling you that it's not a primary issue to us. Stay away from it. But she did not listen to them. She kept pushing that agenda, you know? So it's like, we don't care what you think. We are gonna tell you what you need to do. That was disappointing.
As a Zimbabwe-born medical doctor, activist, and former ambassador of the African Union to the US, Dr. Chihombori is known to be confrontational and never shy away from confronting the neo-colonialists in Africa.
Let's make no mistake about this. We're sick and tired of giving up our lunch to Western nations. African children, they need to eat too. African children need to go to school. African children need good healthcare systems. Behind all that abuse, we need to let the Western world know that there are millions of African children who are going hungry, millions of African children who are dying, millions of women, African women who are dying giving birth to another life, millions of African youth who are unemployed, all because the Western world is continuing with the agenda of exploitation, and exploitation of the African continent.
Named as Mother of Africa by many, Arikana ended her Al Jazeera's interview with a statement most Africans would agree with.
But when it's all said and done, we're saying to the world, no more can you continue to exploit the Africans.
What do you think about what Dr. Arikana Chihombori said? Do you think France has truly become a wounded elephant in Africa? Or do you think the former colonial power is still relevant? More importantly, do you think the United States will go down just as France did? Let's hear what you think in the comment.